from jlamusic.com. I am a piano, singing and music theory teacher of over 25 years, and today we are going to be talking about the things that your child and yourself should know before they start lessons. I actually teach children from ages 4 up. I think it's a really lovely age to teach, but it can come with some questions that parents will quite often have before and may not get an opportunity to ask. My mum was exactly in that position. I started very young and she had no idea what to ask, what methods to use. So hopefully these will answer any of those questions and put your mind at ease. Point number 1, knowing the alphabet from A to G. So the musical alphabet runs from A to G, and on the piano it just goes over and over again. Knowing those letters from a personal teaching approach, I find it easier if they do have that bit of background knowledge before they start. It's not a deal breaker. There are lots of different methods to teaching. This is just the one that I personally teach, is with the letter format. But being able to recognise those letters on the page is also extremely helpful. It's not actually how I started. I was very, very young, as I said, and I didn't know my alphabet. So my teacher really did struggle with me to learn the identity of the notes on the piano at first. It did come in, but I had to learn the alphabet along with the piano side of things with him. So I personally find it a little bit easier if they know it. Just helps them to get things a little bit more quickly. Point number 2, being able to count to 5, and again recognizing those when they're written. So in music, at the beginning particularly, the notes that they are going to learn will be 1, 2, 3 and 4 beats long. Again, there are other ways of doing this. Some teachers will teach more of a word format, so instead of 3 beats going 1, 2, 3, they might teach sausages or something along the lines of. Again, the way that I teach is more to do with the numbers, because they then don't have to transition again into numbers later on. The other reason that numbering will really help is because we do actually number the fingers from 1 to 5. So for the fingers, if you hold your hands together, you have your thumbs 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. That will again really help if they can recognise those notes on the page in front of them. Number 3, sitting at the piano for somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes. Some children are more than happy to sit for an extended period of time at the piano and learn, and others are little wrigglers and they want to get up and be doing things. I have twins that are extremely different in the way that they learn. If they're really into a particular topic, they will sit and look at it. The other one, not an interest. So I can experience this firsthand at home every day. In the teaching side of things, I've had all kinds. Some that will sit for 5 minutes and then they need to get up. Some that will sit for half an hour and feel no need to get up. There is no right or wrong. Everybody is different, and that's a really lovely thing. It's what keeps teaching interesting and keeps you finding different ways of teaching subjects. So there is, I promise you, no right way or wrong way. If your child expects to sit for a certain period of time, whatever that be, it just helps to ease them into lessons a little bit more, so it's not such a shock, particularly if they are, really energetic and they're like running around. I personally allow very small ones a certain amount of movement time within the lesson, so we'll march to a beat, or we'll do dynamic standing up and sitting down exercises. But it doesn't again work for every child. Some of them feel very nervous at the beginning and they couldn't think of anything worse than getting off their seat. So just knowing what might be expected will help, but this will also transition across to practice, because as you know, the lesson is only one portion of learning. Practice is really what gets the progress going. So if they know that they can sit for a certain amount of period during the lesson, the teacher will be able to tell you roughly how long that is, and then you can sort of structure their practice at home a similar way. Point number 4, knowing left from right. I know this is not the easiest. Some come here knowing it, some haven't got a clue. It really doesn't matter too much. It is obviously easier if they know their left hand from their right hand, but I do tend to teach this if they don't know it. I have met a couple of teachers in the past that will absolutely say they have to know this before we get there, because maybe they're on a time constraint of 15-minute lessons, and they just, they want that former knowledge so they don't have to waste too much time trying to learn it. But honestly, it's not a deal breaker. There are ways of teaching it, but if they do have that, then it just again makes the learning a little bit easier. It means that they can associate notes with a particular hand. Again, not the way that I learned, didn't have a clue about left and right. So it does help to sort of portion the notes out and give the hands responsibility for a certain portion of notes. Point number 5, wanting to play or an enjoyment of music. Now, I understand as a parent, as much as a teacher, that we do quite often try to encourage our children to take on hobbies or activities in things that they don't have a prior knowledge of, and haven't expressed an interest in, just to see if it's something that they would like. And that is absolutely fine. That I do the same thing with mine. One thing I would say is, if your child has had an enjoyment of singing, they make up their own songs, they seem to like dancing around, even bashing a piano if you've got one at home, that is a really good time to start to think about, would formal lessons be something that they might get something out of? Again, you do have to know your child and how they work. Would the formality be the right time? Would going to somebody's house be the right thing for you, or having them come to you? There's all these kinds of things that you have to think about. But if there is that initial spark, it's a really good thing to start thinking at that point. Funny story, when I was very small, my dad bought me this tiny keyboard about this big, and my mum was looking after me at home and she could hear music coming from our living room. So she walked in, there was nobody there, but she could hear the EastEnders theme tune coming from somewhere. So she ran out of our house, went to our next door neighbour, this poor old Italian lady who we were so close to, and she said, "Lily, I think I have a ghost in the house." So poor Lily comes around with my mum, and she's trying to convince my mum that she doesn't really think a ghost would be playing EastEnders, but they would have a look. And I was my little 2-year-old self sitting behind the sofa, completely hidden from view, bashing out EastEnders on this tiny little keyboard. And past that, I'd learned a few more pieces, and then actually it was our local priest that said to my mum, "I really think you need to get her lessons." And my mum was not a musician. She didn't know where to start, which is actually why this is my first video, because I really do think it helps so many parents out. There are questions that my mum had, there are questions that parents that I see have, that I see time and time again. So whatever way you come to the piano, having that little spark of enthusiasm before, again, will really help progress. But having said that, a really good teacher will always be able to keep that enthusiasm alive. Number 6, arranging a consultation or a meeting with the teacher before you start lessons. Personally, in my piano business, I always arrange a consultation with the parents or guardians and the prospective student, before they embark on lessons. Most of the time, if not all the time, we've already sorted out a slot that would be perfect for that student. But that initial meeting is really good for both parties. It will certainly hopefully make the little one feel a lot more comfortable come first lessons. They feel like they know me, and then they know where I teach. They've seen the piano, they've seen the setup, and also parents can ask any questions. They can find out what lessons are about, how I teach, and on that particular topic, how I teach will differ depending on the student. So it does change in respect of books that we use, learning material, even the length of the lesson, how much engagement there needs to be. Does there need to be that movement time within the lesson? That particular consultation can really help me to structure that student's lesson individually. Everybody is different, and as I've said before, that is what makes it such an amazing job. It's meeting new people and finding different ways of doing things and seeing someone really progress and enjoy what they do. but it isn't a one size fits all. So if you're able to meet the teacher beforehand, just to run through some of the, even the more mundane things, payment and all of the rest of it, that does help. But personally, I find it invaluable. Just that half an hour before we start lessons works wonders for me. The other really good thing for a parent or a guardian actually is that I tend to try and arrange the consultation at the time that the lesson would be, if we're able to, because it really helps for you to see what the travel is like to get there, what the parking situation is. All of those things can really come into play. I know personally, my mum, she actually didn't like driving at all. And the first time we went to my piano teacher's house, I remember her getting really flustered because she couldn't find anywhere to park. He lived right opposite a church, and my lesson happened to be just after service had finished. It was a nightmare. She was stressed out before my first lesson had even started. So hopefully these little things will really help with that consultation. Number 7, this is a big one, having something to practice on at home. Some may think that this is a no-brainer. I can actually understand why it wouldn't be. I think particularly with something like the piano, it is a big piece of furniture, let's be honest. And parents and guardians will quite often message me and say, we don't have a piano at home, we don't have a keyboard. Do they need to have this before they start? This really is an individual perspective, I think, from that teacher. The way that I teach, I would say yes. Having something at home that they have access to, even if the first few lessons they aren't physically playing anything, having it there will really help them to transition in and out of lessons, and practicing at home, knowing that it's there. It's not a big new thing that suddenly happens 4 lessons in. Having said that, quite often, a teacher won't actually be doing anything on the piano to begin with. It will be all of these different exercises, maybe the marching and recognising different beats and things like that, or left hand and right hand if that needs to be worked on. So it's not necessary that it will actually be used at the beginning, but personally I think having it in the house, having it set up and ready to go, is a really good way of actually encouraging your child to commit to those lessons, because they know that that is the thing that they're going to be playing once they've learned this background knowledge. What you practice on, again, can differ. I learned on a Casio keyboard up until, must have been, I think, grade 5. And realistically, I shouldn't have been playing on it for that long. It was quite small, so I was always missing notes. And had to kind of guess where some of the low notes that I needed were on exam day. Not great. It didn't allow me to do dynamics. So dynamics are the louds and softs that you put into your piece to give it a bit of emotion, or a little bit of interest, a bit of character. And it was very light to touch. And that meant that when I did transition onto a piano, I found it so difficult to push those notes down, particularly being very young as well. So one thing I would say is, for the beginning, having just something that they can play on is brilliant. That will give them enough. They won't need that many notes right at the start anyway. In an ideal world, you would like something that would be at least 66 keys, to be weighted, so that means that the keys are a little bit harder to push, and to be touch sensitive. So the harder you push, the louder it gets, and the softer you push, the quieter it is. Those are nice to have, but just having something at home to begin with is so essential. And I do honestly think it actually makes the parent or guardian's lives so much easier when it comes to them sitting down and having to do formal practice. I really, really hope that these points helped you in some way. Honestly, learning the piano has been the most important thing in my life, really, in terms of, giving me relaxation, giving me focus. It taught me an awful lot. And it is still the thing that I use if I've had a really stressful day, if the twins are going slightly bonkers, if work's actually really busy. A lot of my students find it crazy that after a really busy day of, say, I don't know, 8 till 7 or 8 till 8 of teaching, that I actually want to play the piano at the end of the day. But it really does relax me, and I think if I can somehow encourage you to maybe start broaching the subject of lessons and finding out a little bit more, I really hope that this will give another little one the exact same enjoyment that I've had throughout my life. I will see you in the next one. I would love for you to subscribe. There will be other videos to do with tips and tricks and certain ways of playing pieces that might help you. One thing I'm really into is finding little ways of making things fun. That's what you have to retain. Even as an adult, half of my students are adults, and we use these same silly ways of remembering things that I use with the children, and they really enjoy it. And so many of them will say, oh, I remember on lesson 2 when you taught me that, and I thought it was really funny. And 7 years down the line, I'm still thinking about it when I play it. So hopefully you will find something in this channel that will really work for you. Take care. See you soon.